So we started looking at the whole world before EPA had published anything, and discovered that Australia had this incredible accreditation program, and New Zealand had copied it. And the big thing was that New Zealand had copied it in Word, and the Word version was on the web, whereas Australia was in a PDF version and nothing was copyable. So at that stage, my technical skills were pretty limited, and so I contacted New Zealand and I said, can I copy what you have? And they said, sure, copy it. And so we took the New Zealand tool, which had been based on the Australia tool, and we spent probably 1,500 hours adapting it and adopting it and changing it to local. We meaning a steering committee of 3 or 4 of us reviewed what I wrote, because one person has to have a handle on it. It's very, very difficult to divvy up indicators and keep control over the whole process. And then we had a broader committee of other disciplines, social work, nursing, dietitians and pharmacists who work in primary care, who also report. And we went through a series of reviews, and all of this in 2003 to 2005, and we came up with a tool. And then we tested the tool in phase 1 after we got Ronald over to train some people. We trained an interdisciplinary group of people. And we also brought a guy from New Zealand who was part of the New Zealand independent assessment program to help us do an independent assessment of our phases. And then we tested it in 3 practices. One was a rural practice, one was an urban practice, and one was a solo practice. And we had a bunch of assessors that we had trained, who we turned into advisors who helped the practices, and we did pre-assessment, a mid-assessment, and a post-assessment, and we found that the practices loved using it, but they were overwhelmed by the indicators in the tool, because at that stage it was a big pile of bound copies of indicators, which was this thing. So we then decided to try and reduce the number of indicators. And in trying to reduce the number of indicators, we did an international review. We found the EPA tool. We found the quality and outcome framework. We reviewed the new Australian, New Zealand tool. And we had a new tool that had been developed in Canada for population-based data collection called CARHI. We looked at that as well. And we found there were 67 indicators that were either in their tool and not in our tool, or in our tool and not in their tool. And all the other indicators were the same. So the other indicators we put aside, the ones that were the same, and we did a modified Delphi to look at the 67 indicators to see whether people felt we should include them. And of the 67 indicators, only 23 of them were excluded, the rest were included, and we ended up with about 70 indicators in the end, in the whole process. And we took those indicators and began to rewrite the book, and it took us a year to rewrite the book, review all of the links and websites, and make sure that they were still appropriate. And then went through a review process with our steering committee to make sure that they were satisfied with it. And that resulted in the book in 2010. Any questions about that?
Well, yeah. Can you be a bit more clear about the actual procedure? You see, the assessor he's coming to check, so it's a sort of a self-assessment, and then somebody comes to check.
It's a self-assessment facilitated program. So every practice that chooses to be assessed has an advisor attached to it, who could be a nurse, a patient, a family doctor, a social worker,
Okay.
dietitian, a pharmacist, any of us is good at being advisors.
And how much time on average does it take the assessor to guide the practice towards this?
The facilitator?
Yeah.
In our pilot projects, not too long. It hasn't been too long. It was very long at the beginning, and it's been reduced now, probably to if the practice meets every 2 weeks, there may be an email connection around the meeting when it occurred, with some kind of feedback occurring around that.
But she's not attending the meeting.
Not necessarily, only attending the meeting if asked to attend.
Yeah. So in hours, how much would it be?
I don't actually have that at my fingertips. It's on our website, the number of hours that they did.
Well, but if it's 1 hour or 20 hours, I have no idea.
I would say, in calculating the economics of what it would cost, we worked out that it would probably be about 3 to 5 days, depending on the size of the practice, in preparation for assessment.
And they get paid for that, or is it voluntary? Or?
It has been voluntary up to now. And it's voluntary in our peer assessment program. What they get paid for is the day that they do the assessment and the day that they write the report.
All right. Yeah.
So that's been calculated. And we think that the 5 days is excessive. We think that we could streamline all of that so that there's other ways, frequently asked questions that can help people with the answers, and only a need for that facilitation at a limited level.
And the patient questionnaire, is it in the assessment instrument?
The patient questionnaire has not been developed here. The original patient questionnaire is in our archive, is in our other tool, and we're planning to develop the patient questionnaire. Because every indicator that requires a patient answer has to be pulled into a questionnaire. And we do, in our criteria, recommend in many of our indicators that this get included in an annual patient questionnaire.
Okay.
So we haven't done the work yet on the patient questionnaire, because a patient questionnaire cannot be too long. You probably have to have a short census and a long census. Few volunteers who are willing to fill out a longer questionnaire, and a large group of people who will do the shorter questionnaire.
And did you look at EQuiP if that would cover?
We have looked at EQuiP, and I think that there are many elements. It would just have, the language would just have to be changed a little bit for our processes. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the principles, the categories, the indicators, and the criteria. We've got 5 guiding principles, 8 categories. The categories are outlined here in the back. Okay, and on the left-hand side, you see the Institute of Medicine. Categories, and on the right-hand side is the Institute of Medicine, on the left-hand side is our book, and in the middle is our Quality Council. And our Quality Council for Ontario has a new legislated role around quality, especially specialist quality in hospitals, and they're expanding now to include primary care, but it's not yet legislated that they include primary care. And so one of the jobs I have is I work at the Cancer Agency in Ontario, and my job is, I am the lead for primary care. My job is to integrate primary care with the cancer system. And it's a fantastic opportunity to see how a well-organized agency can run. And one of the things they do really well is quality improvement and quality assessment, and they report regularly comparative, useful data for all of the regions on a whole variety of different indicators. And they've been through a process of trying to categorize their indicators in a helpful and useful way. And they were challenged by whether to include the Institute of Medicine categories in what they were doing. And when they reviewed the Institute of Medicine aims from crossing the chasm, their aims that they have that have become the foundation for many quality and safety initiatives. They found the language didn't quite jive with what they were doing in cancer. So they did something really simple. They changed the language and the explanation. So I had this aha experience there that I could change the language and the explanation. And so what I did is I not only changed the language and the explanation in our tool for the same categories as the Institute of Medicine, but I also changed it for the Quality Council. So one of the things in the Quality Council is they felt that the Institute of Medicine didn't include integrated, and I thought that integrated didn't include continuous. So I added integrated and continuous, and I changed that explanation so that all of our continuity of care indicators are now included there. There was nowhere in the Institute of Medicine to put them in. And we also have, because of the focus of the Australian Accreditation Program and EPA on practice management, there was nothing in the Institute of Medicine around practice management, especially around human resource management, team management, all of the issues that are so critical to quality in how we work. But they had one in the Ontario one called Appropriately Resourced. So I adopted that, and a lot of our practice management things go into appropriate practice resources. And you'll see on the other side here, we used all those categories and filled in all of our indicators. And that was how we got 8 separate categories and put all of our indicators in there. And if you look at...
When you did this, was that already long before? Was that more or less the first step? Or because you choose a value-based sort of division. You see all these values that should be appropriate and integrated, and the value efficient and the value this. You could also have chosen for a more neutral sort of division in chapters.
We had the more neutral New Zealand model with 5 categories in it. And right through our Delphi study, we retained those 5 values. And right at the end of our Delphi, we proposed to people that we shift into these areas, just to make it more comparable with other work that was going on in the specialty field and in other areas that we thought would be helpful. And people were very positive about that. So we went for that. And as it was with the Australia-New Zealand model, like EPA, it is a predominantly practice management model. It isn't a clinical model.
This, you mean this?
No, the Australia-New Zealand one is not a clinical model. But our first model, our Scottish model, had a lot of clinical indicators in it. And so right at the beginning, we added clinical indicators, and we didn't separate our clinical indicators. And there's a lot of politics around separating your clinical indicators because you're paid from a different organization, or because it interferes with, I don't know what it is, some philosophy behind it. We didn't have that politics, so we always included clinical indicators. And E are all of our clinical indicators, which we have included. And I think that, except for a couple that are in the quality and outcome framework, that our Delphi group didn't feel we should include. Everything is in there. And we also have an open indicator in E9, where we can add any indicator, any clinical indicator, because we have the same approach to all of our clinical indicators. So it's not limited in any way. And it includes a broad range of how we manage any problem in family medicine. And we also have issues around